Welcome to Perfect Union Pending, the show where policy meets real life and democracy is still under construction. I'm Taylor Darcy, your guide through the messy blueprints of American governance. Elizabeth Wagner is a consumer protection attorney specializing in limit law and credit reporting disputes. She has represented consumers against credit bureaus, banks, and debt collectors, particularly in cases of identity theft and reporting inaccuracies. A 2017 graduate of California Western School of Law, she is a feminist advocate, pet mom to 5 animals, all named after breakfast foods, and currently resides on California's Central Coast. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Remember when we were studying for the bar and all the fun stress that entailed?
Oh, yes. So happy that we have that part of that stage of our life is behind us.
Right. I mean, I remember being the most stressed I think I've ever been, although, to be fair, I hadn't been a practicing attorney yet, so I think that was just like a prelude to the fun that is practicing, which is a completely different ballgame than what it was. So we've known each other we've been practicing for about 8 years, and certainly we've learned a lot since law school, and we've certainly grown, but more importantly, we live in a country right now where the rule of law is under assault. We're mostly in a constitutional crisis at the moment, where we have the executive branch that is trying to be the unitary executive branch, and there's a lot of pushback. Can you kind of frame what that means from the consumer protection angle? Where are we at? Where are we headed? What do you think we can do to prevent the more bad stuff from happening?
Yeah, so that's a big question. But where are we at with everything, I think, is the starting point. And where we're at is we're having these little rights that what I do to protect for, suing credit bureaus or car manufacturers on behalf of the little guy. They're trying to chip away at those rights and slowly taking away a lot of these consumer protections that are in place. And it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. They're not going to wake up and no longer be able to dispute an inaccuracy on their credit report or be able to sue a car manufacturer. But even heading into this, there was a huge change in the California limit law that just happened that was under the guise of trying to expedite limit law cases in California, but it's actually coming into fruition in a way that's maybe limiting the amount of money lawyers can make off of the cases, which is attacking the consumer rights, because if we can't make a living off of defending them or bringing those cases don't get brought. So with them being this administration and Trump attacking the FTC, dismantling a lot of these federal agencies that implement consumer protections, what you're going to see is a lot of those rights being reeled back a little bit by a little bit, to the point where it's going to be somebody who's trying to buy a house can't get something that's wrong off their credit report, and then they have no recourse, and they don't know when they lost the right to even have that fixed for them.
Right.
So it's something that they're not going to feel immediately unless something goes wrong in their life. Same thing with getting a lemon, buying a bad car. You don't know you've lost the right to demand a repurchase, to get all of these other remedies for yourself until you're in a position to need to demand them and they're gone. So right now we're going towards everything still kind of the same.
Right.
In the industry, there's a lot of, emails back and forth, watching things, trying to track the data on how it's changing. And what I fear is going to happen is we're going to see some of these lawsuits go away, possibly in their entirety, because they're going to take away the private consumer, being able to act as a private attorney general. If they do that in with certain laws that we have, that's a huge implication in the consumer protection realm.
Can you explain what acting as a private attorney general means? That's it's kind of a foreign concept. Even I'll be frank, even within law, right? I mean, that's not necessarily a common thing, but I know that I believe it's called PAGA, if I'm not mistaken. That's an important part. But kind of break that down for us so we can understand why that's so important.
So PAGA is actually in the employment side. So I'm not super familiar with PAGA, but I do know that
Gotcha.
that's part of this. But the being a private attorney general means that I'm able to something that's typically the government's duty to protect. They are the ones who are in the position to better protect its people. But because this affects so many people, the government can't be vindicating the rights in the millions, in the hundreds of thousands even. So they give us this private right of action that allows private persons through private attorneys to bring lawsuits against major corporations to vindicate these specific enumerated rights. So specifically with being the credit reporting stuff for lack of a better word, but when there is an identity theft situation and there is a person trying to fix their credit report, we are empowered as private attorney generals to sue Experian, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whoever it may be, on behalf of that consumer. So the government has empowered us to act as that. And they've made these statutes fee shifting. So that means when we prevail, the plaintiff or our client pay us, the defendants pay us.
Right.
So it provides this route to us where these cases wouldn't necessarily on their own be worth it to attorneys.
Right.
But because we have that tool in place, we're empowered to sort of pursue these smaller cases. I don't think they're smaller. Most people don't think they're smaller, but you go in from a judge who's handling $1 million cases, they
Right.
don't think $1,000 case is big. It's not big. It's not a big deal.
Well, and to be honest, like I handle civil litigation, or I did more than I do. And, if you're not talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's almost not worth suing for, right? And that leaves a lot of things in the justice system that they don't really handle. In fact, just recently, I think it was beginning of this year, they increased the limits for limited civil, unlimited civil, and small claims court from it was 25K, now it's 35K. It was like 10 to $24,999.99 for the limited civil, and then small claims court was 10,000 or less. And now they've bumped that up basically 5, and then up to 25, and then up to 35. And so what's happening is the dollar amounts for these cases are getting pushed upwards because, I mean, things are legitimately getting more expensive, but there's a very big difference in discovery for a case that is a $35,000 case or higher than a case that is small claims court. And people don't necessarily understand those differences, and I'm not expecting them to. But there's a real issue with lack of justice when we're talking about what's a lot of money to a lot of people, but isn't when it comes to litigation, right? It's really hard to get attorneys to take cases if they're not going to get paid for them. And it's really hard to ask someone that has damages of 10,000 or 20,000, which is a lot, but it's not a lot for litigation, right? Like litigation, 100,000 is a good number for most attorneys, because then the investment in litigation makes sense. Because if you spend 30, 40,000 on litigation, that's a good return on investment as far as like getting that $100,000 back. But the smaller that number is, the less likely it makes sense for the attorney to spend the time and energy, or the potential client, on litigating that case. And I can certainly see why the consumer protections is a huge issue, because it's almost like class action stuff, right? Like where you've got small dollar amount wrongs, still wrong, but spread over numerous people. Well, in consumer, correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, I am happy to be so. Consumer typically are lower dollar amounts, right? Than what I see in civil civil litigation for businesses, um, but they're still wrong when it comes to the dollar amounts, right? But they're smaller than what would be typically. You don't want to spend $350 an hour on an attorney, $450, $600 an hour on an attorney for a $10,000 claim or a $15,000 claim or whatever. But those are the things that are really wrong, right? Like the people that are getting hurt by that. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, that's
Okay,
completely accurate. The with lemon law, there's a max set of amount of money they can get, and that's
right,
set forth in the statute. With the credit reporting, it's a little bit more open ended, but we're still talking the maximum a case is worth is a couple $100,000,
right,
and you see judges that will say, "Oh, this I've got a Google case. We're talking about $20 million. I don't care about this."
right, right. Well, and that's an unfortunate truth. And our justice system is not built for the modern era. It's and that's a we're seeing that more and more with the Trump issue, right? Like he's able to do things that the system just was never built for. And it's sad too because we need to have some judicial reform. We need to have just stupid things, like simple, easy things that we could fix, like having consistent rules, like from one jurisdiction to the next. You know, avoiding, and I'm not trying to diss the judges I've been before. I've had some good ones, I've had some not so good ones, but having rules that are consistent from one courtroom to the next, right? Where it's not their own little personal fiefdom. And I'm not trying to say that they don't have jurisdiction or they don't have a say in what happens in the courtroom, but one set of rules in one court can be a huge miscarriage of justice for rules in a different court, right? You're going to have different outcome, and that's not what we should want. We should have consistent rules from federal to state to local to. I mean, when I start listing off, one time I was doing an appeal, and the security guard who worked at the court, we were talking briefly, and he mentioned, he was talking about, the attorneys that come through or sometimes they're a little egotistical, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I get it, and I'm like, and we started talking, and I explained to him all. He didn't know this, and he works in the appellate division of the court. He did not know how different the rules were from one jurisdiction to the next, one courtroom to the next, one everything to the next. And he looks at me, and he's like, why would anyone ever want to do that? And I'm like, I know, it's a royal pain in the patukas. And imagine a layperson trying to navigate all of these rules and expecting a successful outcome, right? And that's just something simple. We could all agree on that we should all have the same rules regardless of area, but we don't. And that's an issue for justice because how do you get it if nobody can follow the rules, or if you have to have a law degree to follow the rules, there's a whole lot wrong with that. So let's talk about what, in the context of lemon law, what exactly is that? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about what that is. I'm not familiar with it enough to be able to speak any type of authority on it. And I'm curious because there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there. What would you say is like the big picture, and then narrow it down to what's the most important details that if you were talking to somebody face to face, should they know?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I immediately tell someone is it's not just about having a bad car. It's a warranty law. So your
Gotcha.
car has to be under warranty for the California's lemon law to take effect. And that can be in the form of if you buy a certified pre-owned, but that's difficult because
Right.
those warranties are only a year. So you need more than one presentation, which can be hard to do in that timeline. So yeah, the big picture is you need a car that has more than one presentation, ideally with the same issue during the warranty period, and you need to present the vehicle to an authorized dealership for repair. And if they're unable to repair it, you are able to ask for a repurchase or a buyback or a replacement. All of those are sort of used interchangeably. I've not seen it be very common that any manufacturer offers a replacement vehicle. So it's usually a repurchase, which is a refund of the money that you have spent. So your down payment, your monthly payments, you get those back, minus an offset that the manufacturers get the benefit of, which is the amount of miles you were able to drive the vehicle before you had an issue. And the big thing I think people think about with lemons too is they think it needs to be the exact same issue. So my engine had a problem with the exact same component multiple times. And that's not necessarily true because this is a giant machine. They're very complicated now, honestly, and highly technical. So if you're having many issues in different parts of your vehicle, it can be part of a larger problem with the vehicle. So just because the exact component's not a problem 3 times or 4 times, that doesn't mean you might not have a possible, ability to get your money back or to get out of that vehicle with the California lemon law. By the time that we get involved, if you have had a repurchase that you've asked for and it has been denied, we can also seek civil penalties, which can be an up to a 2-time civil penalty. And it's a misnomer because, these laws are not written good at all. But it's actually a multiplier of 3. So if you've got a $20,000 vehicle that your refund is $20,000, then your full-time civil penalty would actually be $60,000. So that is something that you could, by the time you get into litigation, you can pursue that extra damage to punish them. It's actual punishment money. So
Right.
that's that consumers can currently pursue, and that is special to California. Not
Right.
every state has that. So that's really great for California. We are pro-consumer here, but
Yes.
did a huge change to the California lemon law this year. Still navigating how that change goes, but it changes the timing on everything. And we
Right.
don't get that discovery that you were talking about earlier. We get limited discovery for a certain amount of time. And if the
Right.
case doesn't settle, then we can get full discovery, but we have to go through these new hoops.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so we'll see how that plays out. But that was something that was lobbied hard for by FCA, some of these really big car manufacturers. So they got the government's ear right now, and it's the
Right.
worst for a company like that to have the government's ear in a way where this is really affecting how we can pursue our, consumer rights.
And I think there's enough. I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, I don't think there's enough people that understand how important these types of things are, because it truly is a balancing act between the right for a producer of goods and services to produce them that are in a way that do not harm the consumer, right? But then the next part of the context is, like, for instance, if I'm remembering correctly, and maybe you don't know the part, but the CFPB was in charge of, like, bank fees. Is that correct? And I'm remembering this, where basically they were limiting the amount of bank fees that they could charge, and so that's something that really affects the poor and the indigent, right? That's the people that, you have a bounce check. You didn't mean to bounce the check. You weren't trying to bounce the check, but it happens, right? Like we all oops on something, and then that overdraft fee kills any type of getting out of the hole, right? Especially when they charge you 36 $50 in some instances, absurd numbers. And so these types of things that are going away or potentially going away are only hurting the people that need the help the most, and that's the poor and people that do live a little closer to the edge of paycheck to paycheck, which, to be fair, some of us always have, and some of us have, we're working on not. But talk a little bit more about some of the things because a car is, typically a single purchase. You purchase it, it's good, 5 years, 6 maybe, unless you're on a lease. Talk about some of the things that the Consumer Protection Bureau help with that are more day to day.
So the junk fees, or the fees that you were just referencing, I thought about that after you asked your initial question, that is something that is immediately going into effect that's being taken away. So there was a limit that was imposed. I think it was $5. You couldn't charge more than $5 for overdraft or return checked fees, and now that's gone. And there was also a limit on how often they could impose those charges. And I think I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but before that change was put into effect, banks were pocketing hundreds of millions of dollars off of this. And as you said, it was always it's not someone who's wealthy who's writing paycheck to paycheck or writing close to that zero in their account. So you're putting poor people in a more poor position. And so the CFPB has rules like that they were implementing. And that was the big one. That was a hard fought for protection that's now been completely undone. So some of the other protections that they have in place have to do with trying to think a little bit on this, but fees are a big one. Imposing interest rates. Those are that's a big one as well. Is monitoring interest rates on certain types of loans. That's something the CFPB protects, and they also are highly involved with the student loans. And I know the student loans are definitely a hot button topic, but they are also helping with students who are dealing with those types of loans that are from not a private student loans or fraudulent situations with entities that may have gone away for various reasons, bankruptcy, or they were fraudulent to begin with. So the CFPB is protecting against that, as well as any business that you may do business with that is not licensed, that doesn't have government backing. The CFPB is there to hold them accountable on a larger scale. And they do sometimes bring lawsuits and on a yearly basis bring in a certain amount of money. And that money goes right back into the CFPB to try to help fund the functioning of the CFPB.
Yeah. In fact, are you familiar with the CSLB licensing requirements at all?
I'm not.
Okay, so this one is really good, and this one is probably worth some money to somebody out there, so I hope they hear it. In CSLB or the Contractor Safety Licensing Board, I always forget the stupid acronym meaning, but anyway, if you are unlicensed in California and you do work on someone's home of greater the value of $500, okay, not a lot of money, you can, what will happen is, even if you do the work to code, they will have what's called disgorgement of profits, where if you get paid 10,000, 15,000, 20, whatever dollar amount, even if you do it absolutely 100% perfect, the person can sue and get all of their money back. Even if you did it perfect, no negligence required. Simply by not having a license, you can be, your entire amount that you did can be refunded back to the person. So they get the value of the property, they get the value of the service, and they get their money back, because CSLB does not want unlicensed contractors out there doing work when there's licensed contractors available. So if you're thinking about undercutting a licensed contractor by not getting your license, think again, number one, and number two, get your dang license. But where this comes into play is if you are in that situation where you hire somebody and they say they have a license and they don't have a license, getting your money back is very possible. And unlike a normal civil suit where you have to prove a lot of stuff, all you have to do is prove that they don't have a license. And it's very easy to do, and you can get your money back. It's one of the most crazy ones that I've ever had to deal with, because of that, because of the fact that they could do it perfectly. Like they could do it exactly to code, but simply by not having that license, they will lose all of that money. It's nuts. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
know where I live, that is incredibly common that people do that. They add ADUs unlicensed a
Yep.
lot. So that's
Yep.
crazy.
Yeah. Hey, there's an area of a practice area for you, that fits in the consumer protection category, right? Like it's CSLB, but it's consumer protection. That's really what it's for, is to protect people from being hurt by unlicensed contractors. And it blows people away when I start talking about that, because they're like, wait, what? Sorry, that's just how it works. Um, so, yeah, those junk fees. I thought, are you a fan of Katie Porter?
I don't know if I'm very familiar with the name. Sounds familiar, but probably not.
She was in Congress and she was reading during one of the hearings The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F.
Oh.
And but she's very pro-consumer. That's why I thought you might have heard of her. But anyway, she was running for Senate against Adam Schiff. And to make a long story short, she was the one that was grilling the Chase CEO about how it is possible that he can make an absurd amount of money. I mean, like $100 million, and his bank teller can barely afford to keep the lights on, right? Like she can't afford to pay rent because of how little they pay their bank tellers. And it was very interesting. You should check it out. It's been on YouTube. But it's one of those moments where, like, yeah, I mean, because so many of these big, the pay gap disparity between, what the CEO makes and what the lowest the janitor makes, right, is absurd. And yet, I don't quite understand how that's okay by people. I don't begrudge anyone making as much money as they humanly possibly can. Knock yourself out. Make your money. I don't care. Except for, and this is my except for, and this is what I teach in my business law course, except for when you harm others in the process. If other people can't live because you choose to make bad choices, like, McDonald's with coffee and Target with their their situation. That's always fun when I start listing off all these different tort cases in my business law course, and people are like genuinely surprised about the coffee case because people only heard the negative about the woman. That the reality was McDonald's was by far in the wrong, right? Like, there was no doubt about that case after you heard everything. But they smeared the crap out of her all over the place. But this idea that these corporations can hurt people, right? Make as much money as you want, but don't hurt your employees. Make as much money as you want, but don't hurt the people that are consuming your products. That should be, Ford with the Pinto case. When I blow my students' minds with that one, when I say it costs $11 to fix the Pinto. First, they always wonder what the Pinto is, but but then when I show them, did you ever see the movie Real Genius?
No.
Okay, so in Real Genius, they're not Real Genius, sorry, Top Secret. It was with Val Kilmer, and there's a scene in there where a truck comes up and dings the back of a Ford Pinto, and it goes ding, and then it goes and it blows up, referring to the Ford Pinto that blew up. And you have to see it. It's a good movie, and rest in peace, Val Kilmer. But anyway, but when I start telling them these stories about cases that that it only cost $11, and yet Ford made the choice to say it's cheaper for us to litigate this than it is for us to spend the money to fix it. That's where you come into play. That's where we talk about, consumer protections. I'm guessing recalls fall underneath consumer protections as well, or is that
Yes.
underneath the National Transportation Safety
The
Board? Yeah, they keep
Yeah,
changing
NHTSA, they
names
call
on
it for.
us. Yeah. Tell us about that. Tell us about how those things fit underneath those. Those are administrative agencies, but how do consumer protections throughout, like the EPA, there's lots of different areas, and I know you may not have knowledge in all of them, but the fact that we have clean water for the most part, that type of thing.
So you made some really interesting points that my clients ask me about every single case. I have a almost script memorized for how I explain this to them. Why are they not buying my car back? And they are paying their attorneys, they're paying you, and then I'm going to get my car back too, or get my money back as well. Why did they not just do what they should have done in the first place? And I have to explain to them that you're not a person. And people don't, they really don't think that until it happens to them, that they're going to be treated like that cog on the wheel, that piece on the conveyor belt. They've made a decision at a certain point that they're going to just put this money into this because they decided that's how they want to do business. And it doesn't make financial sense at the end of the day. It doesn't make moral sense at the end of the day. And I don't know who's talking to them on accounting side saying to fight this, because it's absolutely absurd. Some of these vehicles are, you're talking a $40,000, $50,000 car, and they end up spending $400,000 to defend the lawsuit. That is absolutely insane.
Well, you get people like Martha Stewart who, and it blows people away when I tell them about her, who you don't screw with her intellectual property, right? Like, she's like the queen. And I say that in the best way possible because she will sue you into oblivion if it means that she protects her brand. And so I guess what it comes down to, sometimes it's the money and sometimes it's the principle of the thing, right? For them, from being sued or suing. Target, there was a case recently where, I'd say recently within the last 5 years, not like there could be a lot of things, where there was a young child who picked up a hypodermic needle and she got infected with something. It wasn't AIDS, if I'm remembering correctly. It wasn't. It was a disease, but it wasn't. It wasn't that. And so the mother said, "Look, we don't want anything other than the treatment that it takes to take care of her. We're not asking to be made rich by this. We just want the treatment." And the treatment was about $1,000, if I remember correctly. Now, if I'm on either the accounting or general counsel for Target, what am I saying to them? Give them the damn money, right? Like $1,000 is nothing. You're going to lose that in a heartbeat. But Target, in their infinitely stupid wisdom, and I do say that because that's the only thing I can do. It says, no, we're going to fight this. They fought and lost, and the award was $1,000,000. Now, I don't know if it got remitted down, whatever. But even still, the fact that you spent the kind of money that you had to have spent to lose is absurd. Over $1,000. If I was general counsel, I would have said, settle, 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 like on Liar Liar, right? When he's trying to get them to settle. Like, you are idiots to have not. And they had to pay the $1,000,000 price. And you're like, at what point do you have to just say, that was dumb, right? Like, from an ethical perspective and a financials perspective, either way, you spend a lot of money on attorney's fees and or you spend a lot of money, and if you actually pay the settlement, that it's going to cost you $1,000,000. It's just the absurdity of this. It just blows my mind, the companies that do that stuff. Because you're like, and what about the image, Like, what about like how you look to other people? I don't shop at Target for the most part after I found that case, right? I mean, other reasons too, but that's that's one of the tops of the list because if a company can't recognize, oh, by the way, they knew that there was there was a drug issue with their parking lot, right? Like it wasn't like they had no clue and ended up making that choice. They knew that they were there. People were using drugs in their parking lot, and they still chose to not own up to it. It's like, no, do the right thing. You win customers that way by doing the right thing. If you make a mistake, it's like we grow up and people are the idea that if you make a mistake, you shouldn't admit that you're wrong. And I know that's a weird concept in law, but it should be the normal, right? Like, oops, we made a mistake. Let's make this right. But they don't. They make a mistake and then they just be like, nope, I'm not going to admit anything. And then they spend $1,000,000 plus on fighting a stupid lawsuit that they didn't have to fight if they would have just done the right thing.
And I've had a chance to depose people for some of these car dealerships,
Mm-hmm.
and their mindset is so different when they're in the company that, and I know I'm really biased on the other side at this point, right? I can't pretend
Right.
I'm a neutral person, but
Right.
they will say things like, these people are just trying to get a free car out of me. We don't make bad cars. And I'm like, you can't truly believe that. You put out 100,000 vehicles. You're saying they're all perfect? That's
Right.
not actually mathematically likely at all. So they really do believe this. And on both sides of the consumer protection that I've worked on, with the lemon law and the credit reporting,
Right.
there have been attorneys who have switched sides, who defended the corporation, and then they've described it as grabbing their soul back,
Right.
or I need to redeem myself. And they're fascinating people to talk to that have done that, because at the end of the day, they made a ton of money doing what they did. So they have
Yeah.
the ability to go do the righteous thing now.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
but it is fascinating that they do know. They
Yeah.
do know that they're, the Darth Vader in the situation.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well,
but they do anyways.
tribalism is a real drug, right? Like you want to be on the winning side of your life. And the idea that you have to work with the cognitive dissonance of saying, I'm not the hero that I think I am. That can be hard for people's perspective, right? Like they have to admit that of themselves. That can be hard. because you're like, I went to law school to help people, right? Or whatever, right? Like typically most people didn't go to law school to become Darth Vader. Just generally, I'm just saying it's true, right? Like most people went to help people. That's most people. There are those exceptions to that rule, but and so you have to come face to face with, do I do insurance defense? Are there people out there that do try to get free stuff out of stuff? Sure, there is, and I don't doubt that. But I would say most people are good people, right? And I can make that pretty generalized statement. But this idea that, you shouldn't own up to your mistakes and say, oops. Well, I mean, look, I'm gonna say this. Apple and all of its faults, right? Like it has plenty of faults. I'm not gonna say that it's perfect. But it was one of the first companies, even as bad as Steve Jobs was, it was one of the first companies that made manufacturers' warranties on computers last longer than 90 days. They were the first company that made them last a year. That's not nothing, right? Like that is something, because before that, computers were lasting 90 days. Their warranties were lasting 90 days. Computers were lasting longer, but then they'd fail in month 6 or month 8. And you're like, well, okay, but I just bought this, right? Like 8 months is not that long for a computer, especially when life cycles of computers were anywhere between 2 and 5 years, right? So the fact that they wouldn't cover them, a computer breaks and you're like, okay, now I have to spend another $3,000 on a new computer, even though I barely got the use out of this thing. And so the fact that Apple went, now they baked it into their price. They're not hurting. I'm not suggesting that they're but it was something. It wasn't. They didn't have to do that. The industry standard was 90 days. They could have just stuck with that and been like everybody else. They increased their pricing and added the warranty. I get it. I'm not naive. They're a money making machine. But at the end of the day, it's nice when you do buy a Mac computer that you do have a year and you can pay extra. In fact, they just recently changed it to where you can purchase their Apple Care. I literally did it yesterday. Even though my couple of my devices are out of warranty, as long as they're new enough, reasonably speaking, you can actually put Apple Care on them, and it's a monthly charge. So it no longer is that you have to buy it within 60 days of buying the device, right? Or 90 days or whatever it was. Like these are a couple of devices that were several months old that actually more like 6 or 7 months old that were far out of warranty, but still relatively new, right? But yeah, and for $20 a month, I'm getting 3 devices that are covered. And which is nice because that wasn't the case for the longest time. And having to come up with $150, $250, $300 for warranty is like, okay, that's a lot extra on top of stuff, especially when you're already throwing down a lot of money. We'll just say that. So, we started with kind of talking a little bit about the protections that are getting lost or that we're losing. What are things that we can do to, what do we need to know to get them back? Where do we need to go with this? In other words, I don't like just saying, here's a problem, good luck, right? What can we do to help us move forward and keep those types of protections?
Well, it's really interesting because you need to lean. Sorry, my cat is trying to claw my head out.
It's okay.
Leaning into your state and local politics more, which
Right.
is previously been such a Republican stance. But to get your state to offer you more protections than what your federal agencies and your federal government's going to do. So our federal government right now is a wild card at best. So go into your city councils, go into your state representatives, get in their ears. I'm very active here locally, and there have actually been some acknowledgments from local politicians about certain things with just postcard parties and things like that seem so small, but in the scale of it, if you can get enough people who care about this issue or this protection, do that. That is what I think is effective, is leaning into those local issues, leaning into your local politicians, your state legislators, your state assemblymen and women, making sure they know what's going on, because you can pass. California has more protections than federal statutes give us, and every state can do that. every state can do that. And it makes doing business very different for people who come to California than for those who go to Texas. And for now, people think Texas is a great place to do business, but consumers disagree.
Right.
So you can take any blue state and increase those protections and hope that people follow suit. California is a sort of a trailblazer for that. Whatever people have to say about us, we do that. And I think getting other states on a local basis to follow that and to increase those protections, because you can do that.
Right. And I think one of the things that I find people don't think of often enough is one voice might not be the loudest, but if nobody else is speaking up, it can be incredibly loud, right? And the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Um, people struggle with, how can I possibly make a difference? Nobody's listening to me. Nobody's paying attention to me. And I had, do you know who Leah Littman is?
Yes.
Okay. I had her on. She was actually my first guest. And I asked her, I said, what do you say to people like that? She says, doing nothing lets them win, right? Like if you don't say anything, then it tells them it's okay. It's complicity, right? It's complicity. You're saying that it's okay by not saying anything. Now, are you going to win every battle that you face? I mean, by speaking up? No, of course not. You're going to meet opposition. But at the end of the day, if we don't stand up for our rights and stand up for these types of protections, then what we get? Then the rich people get richer, right? The companies can literally kill you with no type of issue, right? They can make a poor product that people die from. I mean, there's a reason why we don't have darts anymore, right? There's a reason why in California fireworks are outlawed for the most part. And I don't just mean because of the weather, because of safety. There's a whole lot fewer injuries from fireworks in California than there are in other states. We live longer because of those things. And I think it's important to remember that, yeah, we may not have the quote unquote freedoms that people have in other states like that, but we also don't have to worry about dying in the same ways as they do. And we can force manufacturers to improve their safety measures. We can force companies to invest in their workforce rather than spending it on more yachts and more rich people stuff, right? Like there's no world in which the rich people need more of what they need, but there's an absolute world where the poor and the people that don't have that we need more, right? We need to do better with housing the poor population. We can spend 20 billion sending it to Argentina, but we can't afford housing assistance for people that are living on the street. Like,
Yeah.
where are our priorities? Why are we letting rich people get richer? And again, I don't begrudge anyone getting money like that. I have no issue with making money and having people get money, but it's when they hurt others. I mean, imagine, you see someone that's starving and, oh, but I get my yacht, right? I don't have to worry about my food. But that's a human being there. Now, I know I have a heart, and that's, much to my capitalistic, desires. my inner capitalist would say, "Arr." But, at the end of the day, it's like I'd rather have a heart and sleep at night than to have more money and be miserable and know that someone else is not living as well as they could simply because of my choices. So, anyway. Uh, so, Elizabeth, by the way, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my oldest daughter's name is Elizabeth. Did I ever tell you that?
Oh, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, my oldest daughter's name is Elizabeth. In fact, today is her birthday. Um, so she turned 11 today, and she is quite she's so amazing. I love her. She's so sweet. Um, she's definitely caught her mother and I together there, which can be a good thing and a bad thing some days. I'm just saying. But anyway, so it's a favorite name. So whenever I talk to you or I see your name, it's always fun because I'm like, "Aw." So you'll always have a special place in my heart, if for no other reason my daughter's named not after you, but with the same name. But anyway, Elizabeth, what what would be like, you talk to a lot of people about consumer protections. If you had to give them one thing that you would say that could improve their life, right? What would that be?
Opt out of arbitration.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. So important. People, it's funny because the independent third party mediation, arbitration, all that stuff got such a, like, everybody thinks they're so good, but I'm like, no, it's not. It's not good. It allows private thing. It allows bad things to remain private, and it allows companies that have significantly deeper pockets to hurt people that it shouldn't. And it's a sad place to be. So yes, opt out of arbitration is a good one. In fact, I don't put arbitration clauses in most of my agreements. Unless the client specifically says I want an arbitration clause, I leave it out because it doesn't help the people that it's supposed to help. It only helps the people that it's not. And it's unfortunate because, especially when I tell them how much a day of arbitration is, and their eyes go ding, and you're like, yeah, sorry, I don't get to make up the prices, but you get retired judges that have been on the bench and they want their cheddar, and I get it, but at the same time, it's expensive for that. And then their eyes get bigger and they're like, wait, what? Which is why, like, people suggesting for these things, it's like, no, my clients don't have unlimited money to do that. Let's just resolve the dispute. Let's come to an agreement. Let's make it happen. But anyway, what else? That was such a good one. Sorry, I didn't want to.
Oh yeah, no, that's my big one. I would tell everybody you can get your credit card agreements out, print them out, cross it out, initial it, send it in. They'll probably keep doing business with you and store it in your file, and it never comes up again until if you have an issue. So
Right.
99% of the time it's not an issue. That's a big thing. The other thing is just talk to people. So I kind of had that thought when you were talking about what can you do, and squeaky wheel gets the grease, but also being neighborly. You don't know. I find that consumers don't know their rights. They don't
Yes.
know that they've been wronged until they talk to someone and find out it happened to them too.
Yeah.
And there's no substitute for that, for talking to people and hearing that. There's a lot of embarrassment with a credit reporting issue, or that I bought a brand new BMW and I can't believe it's having issues. I don't want to talk to anybody about it because I'm embarrassed that I spent $80,000 on a piece of junk. There's a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want people to talk to people because these problems are so everyday, and that's what consumer attorneys are for. And you do probably have more recourse than you ever think you do.
And silence lets them win, right? Like, I don't have a better way of saying it than Professor Lemon did. But I mean, in the respect of, if you keep quiet about something that happened because you don't want to burden someone else, you might be the key that unlocks that door for them to having what they need. Here's a good one for you, and you probably may or may not know this one, but I used to work at a credit union, and our credit cards were pretty good credit cards. They weren't crazy. They weren't the wackadoodle ones that a lot of them are now. But what most people don't understand is that they have, depending on the card, okay, always got to, the inner attorney in me just goes nuts if I don't say that. Depending on the card, you can have travel insurance up to a certain dollar amount. And depending on our cards, you could have 100,000, 400,000, even $1 million worth of travel insurance simply by booking the flight with your credit card. That you, if for instance, AD&D was one of the benefits, right? If you go down in a plane crash, your family's entitled to that benefit. But most people don't know their benefits that are available with their credit cards. So they go unclaimed by a large margin. So these credit card companies can provide the benefit, provide it, without ever actually having to pay it out. Because, well, why would they? They're not going to tell you that it exists. And so one of my favorite times was when people were, especially new kids, were getting new credit cards. Well, maybe. But anyway, and they would come to me and I'd tell them that detail. And I'd be like, okay, so make sure that you read the fine print on this, and make sure that someone who would be a viable beneficiary, your mom, your dad, whomever, for the kids, or your spouse or whomever, they know about this. Put this in a safe spot. Put it in a place where that if something were to happen on this flight or this trip that you're on, that you have this available to you, that you're aware of it. Because otherwise, if you don't know, you don't know what you don't know. And so pay attention to these little things. You could have $1 million in coverage that you didn't even know about it, and your family could be well taken care of simply by purchasing it with a credit card instead of a debit card. And again, not all cards are like that. I'm not going to get into that, but that's one of those details that not a lot of people know. But
Mhm.
man, they are sure happy when I've told them. And they were just like, yay, because nothing bad happened. But at the end of the day, something could have. And their lives and their families could have been, huge. Could have been impacted hugely. Huge? That's not a word. Anyway, you know what I mean. Elizabeth, it's been so good to catch up with you and our pre thing. Thank you so much for your time, and let me know if there's anything that certainly I can help you with. But I'd love to talk with you again, and maybe we'll talk more in some policies and details of ways to help our fellow people. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was so nice to catch up with you too.